am Hannah Whitmore, a 31-years-old woman. I run a small interior design business in Charlotte, North Carolina. A few months ago, I lost my father, and with him, I thought I lost the last person who truly believed in me. But what came next, it shattered more than just my faith in family. The last time I stepped into my childhood home, it didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a museum of everything I'd just lost. The same dusty scent of old books and polished wood hit me the moment I opened the front door. The house hadn't changed, the staircase still curved the same way, the floorboards still moaned beneath the same spots, and the light still spilled in soft and golden through those big front windows. But something essential was missing. Dad. The silence felt different now. He wasn't just out on the back porch or tinkering in the garage. He wasn't going to walk back in from the yard, wiping his hands on that old red shop towel. He was gone. I held my breath as I walked down the hallway toward his office. My heels clicked against the floor, slow and deliberate. I wasn't sure why I felt nervous. Maybe because I knew what was waiting in that room would change things, not just financially but emotionally, legally, irrevocably. Mr. Goldwyn, our father's estate attorney, was already seated when I arrived. The man was probably in his 70s, with sharp eyes hidden behind thick lenses and a patience that felt professional, not personal. He offered me a polite nod and gestured to the empty chair beside him. And there she was. Lacey, my sister. Perfectly pressed in a cream-colored blouse, a pair of pearl earrings that looked suspiciously like Mom's old set, and her long blonde hair tied into a low, neat twist. She looked like someone attending a board meeting, not a will reading. Our eyes met, but only briefly. No smile, no warmth, just a faint acknowledgement like we were strangers who shared blood but nothing else. Thanks for being on time, she said, cool and casual, her voice laced with that faintly patronizing tone she'd mastered since we were teenagers. I ignored her. Mr. Goldwyn cleared his throat, straightening the manila folder in front of him like it was holy scripture. Thank you both for coming. I know this isn't easy, he said. Lacey folded her hands on the table. I clenched mine under it. He began reading. The first part of the will was straightforward. Dad left me the house. I blinked. I hadn't expected that. Lacey looked over at me, but I couldn't read her expression. I remembered the countless afternoons I'd spent on this porch with Dad, painting trim or restaining the railings. Maybe he remembered that too. Next came the retirement accounts. Those were to be split equally between us. That made sense. No surprises. Then came the trust. Even the word felt heavy. I straightened in my seat. Dad had always referred to that trust as something for the future, for the both of you. It totaled $620,000, money he'd saved quietly over the years, investing smartly, setting it aside for something bigger. We talked about using it to open a design and build studio, my creative side paired with his craftsmanship. It was our dream, our plan. But then, the trust, Mr. Goldwyn said, is to be managed solely by Lacey Whitmore, named here as financial steward, with full discretionary authority regarding fund distribution. I didn't understand the words at first. Then they hit. Lacey would have full control, full discretion over all of it. I blinked, my mouth opened but no sound came out. What? I finally managed, my voice cracking. Lacey looked at me with a soft, almost amused smile. Dad wanted someone responsible to handle it, she said, as if she were explaining something obvious to a child. That's not true, I said. He told me, we talked about this. It was always meant to be shared. I guess he changed his mind, she replied, her tone infuriatingly calm. I looked at Mr. Goldwyn. This can't be right. He was sick. He wasn't in his right mind the last few weeks. He shifted uncomfortably. I assure you the document is legally sound, notarized, signed. Let me see it, I said. He slid the paper toward me. I took it with trembling hands. There it was, a full page of legal wording, sealed, notarized, dated 10 days before Dad passed. And at the bottom, his signature. But something felt off. It was too clean, too steady. 3 months ago, for my birthday, Dad had sent me a card. He could barely sign it. The handwriting was crooked, faint. He'd been on heavy medication. But this signature, it looked like he'd signed it at 35, not 71 on his deathbed. Can I have a copy? I asked, my voice flat. Of course, Mr. Goldwyn said, already printing it out from a nearby scanner. I didn't say another word. I stood, took the folder, and walked out. Outside, I collapsed into my car, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only solid thing left in my world. I stared straight ahead for several minutes, my pulse loud in my ears. It wasn't about the money. It was the betrayal. The knowing way Lacey had looked at me when that document was read, the cold silence that followed, the calculated timing. She had done this. She'd stolen from me. From Dad. I drove home in a fog, the city blurring around me. I barely noticed the traffic lights. I didn't turn on the radio. I just played every memory with Lacey in reverse, birthdays, holidays, late-night kitchen talks, all of it tainted now by this cold, cruel twist. At home, I didn't sleep. Instead, I pulled out an old shoebox of cards, letters, emails from Dad. I scanned every word, searching for confirmation, proof that I wasn't losing my mind, and I found it. 3 months before his death, Dad had emailed me. Once I'm gone, I want you and your sister to use the trust together, build something good. You'll make a hell of a team if she lets you. I printed it, highlighted it, stapled it to a page in a new binder. Then I pulled out my notebook and wrote a name in block letters on the first page. Lacey. Below it I wrote, timeline of Dad's final month. Identity of notary. Hospice records. Signature comparison. Contact Amy. I didn't cry that night. I didn't scream or punch a pillow. I planned, because I wasn't going to let my sister steal my future. Not quietly, not legally, and not without a fight. I didn't tell anyone for the first few days. Not my friends, not my coworkers, not even Amy. I needed space to think, to pull myself out of the emotional haze and into the cold clarity of strategy, because this wasn't going to be fixed by a conversation. Lacey had already made sure of that. She laid her trap. I had stepped right into it, and now I needed to step back out, piece by painful piece. I started with the document. I must have stared at that signature 100 times, comparing it to every card, every old check, every scribbled sticky note my dad had ever left me. The deeper I looked, the more I knew that wasn't him, not the man who struggled to hold a pen in his final month, not the man who left shaky letters that trailed off like his breath. So how was this signature so smooth, so perfect? I reached out to someone I never thought I'd need, a forensic handwriting analyst. Her name was Kimberly. She worked out of a small office 2 hours away, and when I showed her the documents, she barely glanced up before speaking. This signature shows hesitation. See here, she pointed. The loops are too controlled, the pressure is inconsistent, it may have been traced. Traced? The word sliced through me. Is that provable? I asked. In a court of law, it's strong evidence, especially if you have comparison samples, and you do. I thanked her, paid the steep fee, and walked out feeling the first flicker of something I hadn't felt in weeks. Momentum. Next, I called Amy. She sounded surprised to hear from me, but not cold, not distant. We hadn't really talked since the funeral. Hey, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Do you remember when Lacey visited Dad at the hospice near the end? There was a pause. Yes, why? Did she mention having a notary with her? Another pause, longer. She said it was just paperwork, financial stuff. She was vague, but I remember something. She asked me to leave the room, said Dad was tired. I swallowed hard. He was barely speaking at that point, wasn't he? Amy sighed, barely conscious some days. I don't know how he could have even read a document, let alone signed one. Exactly. I asked if she'd be willing to write a statement. Nothing official yet, just a timeline of what she remembered. She agreed. 2 days later, I had her email printed, signed, and dated. Piece by piece. I contacted the hospice, asked for notes, visitation logs, even medication records. They weren't supposed to give me everything, but when I mentioned that I was preparing for legal action regarding financial abuse of a dying patient, their tone changed. A few days later, a package arrived. Inside was a chart showing Dad's medication schedule during the final 2 weeks of his life. On the day the trust document was signed, he had been given heavy doses of morphine and lorazepam, enough to make him drowsy, barely responsive. According to the nurse's notes, he had trouble swallowing that day, could not speak clearly, could not hold a pen. And yet his signature was perfect. I added the log to the binder. Lacey, meanwhile, was thriving online. Her new condo, minimalist, modern, dripping with luxury, was splashed across her Instagram. So was the new white SUV, the rooftop brunches, the champagne flutes. "Rebuilding with grace," she wrote under one caption. I wanted to throw my phone across the room. She didn't just steal money, she stole the story. She painted herself as the grieving daughter turned empire builder while I sat here, quiet, angry, and invisible. Not for long. I made my final move before going to court. I contacted our father's former financial advisor, Harold Breyer. He'd retired, but I tracked him down in Asheville. "Of course I remember you, Hannah," he said warmly when I called. "Your dad loved talking about you." I told him what had happened. He was quiet for a long moment, then he said, "That doesn't sound like him. He told me just months before passing that he wanted everything equal between you girls. He said he didn't want any more fighting." I felt my throat tighten. "Do you have that in writing?" I asked. "I think I do. Let me check my emails. I saved most of them." 3 hours later, I had a PDF. Dated, archived from my dad. "Harold, I finalized the trust language. It's going to be even between the girls. No solo control, no drama, just fairness." I cried when I read it, not because of the money, but because I wasn't crazy. I hadn't imagined the version of him who believed in me. Lacey had hijacked his legacy. But I was taking it back. I handed everything to Marissa Chan, the estate attorney I'd quietly hired weeks earlier. She was sharp, focused, and deeply unimpressed by pretty fraud, as she called it. After reviewing the binder, she looked up at me and said, "This is more than enough to request a full investigation. If the court agrees, we can access Lacey's accounts. Every transaction, every dollar she moved. If we find intent to deceive, she's done." "Can we stop her from spending what's left?" I asked. "We can file for a temporary injunction. If the judge signs off, her access to that money will freeze until the case is heard." Good. Because this wasn't about stopping her. This was about exposing her. Lacey had no idea. Not yet. She still texted me occasionally, fake check-ins with sugar-sweet tones. "Hope you're doing okay, Red. Let me know if you want to talk about Dad's accounts. We should get lunch sometime soon. I feel like we haven't connected in forever." Every text made my skin crawl. But I said nothing. Because silence was my strategy. The day before the court hearing, I got a call from Marissa. "It's happening. The judge approved discovery and a temporary freeze. Will serve her by end of day tomorrow." I stood by the window of my apartment that night, watching the city lights flicker below. And I made myself a quiet promise. I would not yell. I would not rage. I would not let her see me sweat. She wanted me erased. But instead, I'd become the storm. The courtroom wasn't what I expected. There were no wood-paneled walls or echoing gavels, just off-white paint, fluorescent lighting, and the smell of coffee and photocopier ink. Still, it felt heavy, like the room itself, new lives were being reshaped inside it. I arrived early, I always do. I wore navy, calm, controlled, composed, the kind of outfit that says I'm not here for revenge, I'm here for the truth. Marissa arrived moments later, her briefcase slung over one shoulder and her face unreadable. She gave me a quiet nod and pulled out her tablet, already reviewing notes. She didn't talk unless she had something important to say. That's why I hired her. 10 minutes before the hearing began, I heard the click of expensive heels echoing down the hallway. "Lacey." She swept into the room like it was a gala, white silk blouse, gold hoop earrings, a designer bag swinging at her side. Her lawyer followed, tall, smug, and the kind of man who looked like he practiced smiling in mirrors. She didn't look at me. Not even once. She sat at the opposite table, smoothed the front of her blouse, and pulled out a glass water bottle like she was about to lead a TED Talk. And then it began. The judge entered, calm, middle-aged, watchful. Marissa started. She opened with the basics, the timeline of our father's illness, the trust document dated just days before his death, the forensic signature analysis, and the hospice medication log. Then she dropped the first bombshell, the email from Dad to Harold. She read it aloud, slowly. No solo control, no drama, just fairness. You could have heard a pin drop. I glanced sideways. Lacey's smile had tightened into something thinner. Her lawyer scribbled something fast on a yellow notepad. Then came the notary affidavit. The one where Jessica admitted the signature had already been on the document when she arrived, that Dad had been barely responsive, that Lacey had assured her it was all pre-approved. The judge leaned back in his chair, fingers tented. He asked Marissa one question: "Do you believe the signature was fabricated?" "I believe," she said, "that my client's sister manipulated a dying man's condition to gain control of assets he intended to be shared, and that the court deserves the chance to review every transaction that followed." And then it was Lacey's turn. Her lawyer stood, smiling too wide, speaking too smoothly. He claimed the signature was real, claimed my grief made me paranoid, claimed Lacey was only honoring her father's final wishes, and that I was lashing out because of unresolved family tension. When he finished, the judge didn't say much, just, "I find sufficient cause to open discovery. All financial records related to the trust will be submitted within 14 business days. Until then, the court is freezing all remaining trust funds and affiliated business accounts." Lacey's composure cracked just for a second. Her foot began tapping, her jaw tightened. She had just lost control. Outside the courthouse, I walked to the parking lot alone. The air was cooler than it had been all week. A breeze carried the scent of damp leaves and car exhaust. I stopped near the sidewalk, breathing deep, letting it land. Then I heard her voice. "Hannah." I turned. Lacey stood there, arms crossed, face unreadable. "What are you trying to do?" she asked. "Ruin me." I blinked at her. "You did that yourself." She stepped closer. "You really think you can win this?" "I don't need to win," I said. "I just need the truth to be louder than your lies." She flinched barely, but I saw it. She didn't reply, just turned and walked to her car without another word. The next 2 weeks were brutal. Lacey's financial records came in as thick stacks of bank statements and corporate filings. Marissa and I went through them line by line. What we found made my blood run cold. She hadn't just spent the money. She laundered it, paid herself through dummy LLCs, faked vendor invoices, and funneled thousands into a fake business consulting service registered under a PO box in another state. Every dollar had been whitewashed, masked, and repurposed, all under the illusion of clean business growth. But it was built on a lie. And we had the receipts. One entry stood out. $28,700, interior build consultation. Same month she posted the ribbon cutting for her new condo office. Same day she uploaded a video thanking everyone who believed in me when no one else did. I watched that clip 10 times. Not because I needed proof, but because I wanted to remember the exact look in her eyes when she said it. So when the day came to file the fraud petition, I felt calm. Not vindicated, not giddy. Just calm. Like a storm right before it breaks open, we filed. Lacey tried to settle. Her lawyer called Marissa with a whispered offer. $75,000 and a non-disclosure agreement. Marissa looked at me. I said no because this wasn't just about money. This was about the story she tried to steal, the identity she wore like a costume while I sat at home choking on silence. I wasn't going to disappear. I wasn't going to let her rewrite the ending. And I sure as hell wasn't signing anything to stay quiet. The judge granted our motion for a full estate audit. A forensic accounting team would go through everything, every account, every document, every asset purchased within 12 months of Dad's passing. It was out of our hands now. But the wave had already started. Lacey's world, the empire she'd built on a foundation of fraud, was beginning to buckle. And the best part, she had no idea that I wasn't finished. Not even close. Because I wasn't just going to take back what she stole. I was going to make her work for it. By the time the auditors stepped in, Whitmore Living was still glowing online, crisp white walls, curated floral arrangements, Lacey in powder suits sipping up mint lattes inside sweet wine. Her followers cheered on, oblivious to the cult silence and frozen cups just beneath the surface. But behind all that polish, the empire was falling. Because the money had stopped flowing. The freeze order meant no more business expenses, more contract payments, no more consulting invoices coming to close LLC. The engine had stalled and slowly the profit was decreasing. The first crack came from her Instagram. She deleted a dozen posts overnight, gone with a rooftop cocktails, hard work pays off captions directly in boxes. Her account shifted quiet almost permanently. Then she posted something quickly. Sometimes when you rise too fast, the fall teaches you who you really are. I stared at that post for a long time. There was no apology, no acknowledgement, just a thin veil of victimhood. And yet I didn't feel victorious, not yet because this wasn't over. Not until I had her full attention. 3 weeks into the audit, I got a call from Marissa. "Do you want to hear the numbers?" she asked. "Go ahead." Of the $310,000 that was supposed to remain untouched, $276,000 was spent or funneled into cell-phone accounts within the first 60 days. Most of it was disguised as vendor payments. I sat down. And the rest? Still in limbo, but the auditors traced the trail. It's enough, more than enough. She paused. "And Hannah, there's something else. We found 2 internal memos from Lacey's bank. They flagged suspicious activity 6 months ago. She ignored the alerts." That was negligence. It was intentional. It was fraud. The court petition expanded. What began as a request to review a signature had evolved into a full-blown case of estate abuse, misrepresentation, and financial concealment. Marissa filed a new motion, full restitution plus punitive damages. If it passed, Lacey wouldn't just owe what she stole, she'd owe more. And that's when her mask started to slip. She showed up at the workshop. Unannounced. I was reviewing mood boards for a client renovation when I heard the door chime. I looked up and there she was, makeup barely applied, sweater sleeves pulled over her hands, no designer bag in sight. "Can we talk?" she asked. I didn't answer right away. She looked smaller somehow, quieter. I led her into the back office, closed the door, and waited. "I know you think I'm a monster," she started, "but I didn't mean to. I didn't think it would get this far." I folded my arms. "You forged a signature and bled our father's legacy dry within 2 months. What exactly did you think would happen?" Her eyes welled up. "I just wanted something for myself. I was tired of watching you be his favorite. I was always the one cleaning up, fixing things, being the adult, and when I saw a way to finally steal what you never earned," I snapped. She fell silent. "I don't want your apology," I said, "and I don't want your tears." She nodded slowly. "So what do you want?" I stared at her, really stared. And then I said the words that had been forming like a shadow at the back of my mind. "I want you to work for me." She blinked. "What?" "I'm rebuilding the studio Dad and I planned. You remember the dream, right? The one he actually shared with me, and since you seem to think you're good with money." "You're joking." "No, I'm offering you a way to pay this back slowly, publicly, brick by brick." She laughed once, bitter, tired. "You want me to be your assistant?" "No," I said calmly. "I want you to earn your name back. That's different." She stood, arms shaking. "You can't do this." "I already did." She left without saying goodbye. But 2 days later, I got an email. Subject: acceptance. Body: I'll start Monday, 9 a.m. Don't expect gratitude. I didn't. When she showed up, she didn't wear heels. She didn't wear anything expensive. She wore a gray sweater, pulled her hair into a low ponytail, and sat at the corner desk entering invoices. I introduced her to the team as Lacey, our new administrative contractor. I didn't mention her last name, I didn't mention mine. She filed paperwork, answered emails, ran spreadsheets. Clients had no idea. But I did. Every morning when she walked in. Every time she took notes during meetings. Every time she asked for clarity instead of control. She was shrinking to fit into the space she'd once tried to steal. And maybe, just maybe, she was learning something about who she used to be. One afternoon, I caught her staring at Dad's framed sketch on the office wall, the one he drew of the studio blueprint. I didn't say anything. But later, when she logged out for the day, she left a sticky note on my desk. It just said, "He'd be proud of you." And maybe, for the first time since he died, I actually believed it. It's strange how quickly you can get used to someone sitting in silence across the room, especially when that silence used to be your battlefield. Lacey worked like someone carrying stones in her chest. No complaints, no shortcuts. She entered numbers, filed receipts, tracked shipments. She came in on time, left quietly, ate lunch alone. Sometimes I'd glance over and wonder if she even remembered who she used to be, the woman in silk blouses giving radio interviews about financial success. Now she wore black sneakers and sat beside a blinking printer that jammed every other hour. But she never quit. Not once. I didn't make it easy for her either. I assigned her the tedious stuff: vendor audits, tax paperwork, refund requests from suppliers who never answer on the first call. She did all of it, no protests, just quiet, deliberate work. And somehow that made it worse. Because I didn't want to forgive her. I wasn't ready. The studio, on the other hand, was alive. Whitmore Workshop was becoming something real, loud with hammers, covered in sawdust, full of coffee mugs, blueprints, and laughter. Clients came in confused, left excited. We landed our biggest job yet, a nonprofit contract to redesign a children's shelter downtown. It wasn't flashy, but it was honest. One night I stayed late, going over floor plans for the shelter project. Lacey hadn't left either. She was buried in invoices, eyes tired, a blanket pulled around her shoulders. I looked up and said before I could stop myself, "You can go, you don't need to stay." She didn't look up. "I want to get these reimbursements logged before the bank's batch cutoff." I paused, then said quietly, "You're not what I expected." That got her attention. She raised her head, surprised. "What did you expect?" A meltdown, excuses, quitting. She nodded. "I expected those things from myself too." We didn't say much after that. But something shifted. Then the rumors started. It began with a blog post, anonymous, titled, "Stolen Legacy: The Hidden Truth Behind Whitmore Workshop." I found it in my inbox one morning, no sender, just a link. I clicked it. It was vicious. It accused me of using sympathy to manipulate our father's estate, claimed Lacey was the real visionary, said I smeared her out of jealousy. The author even mocked my interior design degree as soft skills with a paintbrush. It wasn't just insulting, it was calculated. Like someone had taken everything I feared people would say about me and made it public. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I sent the link to Marissa. She called 10 minutes later. "Do you want to take legal action?" I said no. Because the truth. It didn't sting the way it would have months ago. That blog post didn't know me. Didn't see the nights I scrubbed grout off my jeans after 12-hour shifts. Didn't see the face of the kid who hugged me when we installed the first bunk beds at the shelter. But Lacey saw it. And she read the post too. I know she did because the next day she came in early, brought coffee, set it on my desk without saying a word. And on top of the cup was a post-it note with a single sentence. "I didn't write it, but I understand why you'd wonder." I didn't reply, I just took a sip. A week later, I got a call from a local journalist. Her name was Mira Ellis. She used to write lifestyle pieces for the paper, restaurant reviews, boutique openings. She told me she'd heard about the studio. And the story behind it. "I want to tell it right," she said, "not as gossip, as growth." I hesitated, then said yes. She came by that Friday, no cameras, just a notebook and a voice recorder. I didn't hold back, I told her everything. The trust, the signature, the silence, the slow rebuild. And Lacey. She agreed to be quoted, on record. "I did something terrible," she said, "but I stayed and I'm still staying." The article went live 2 days later. 2 sisters, 1 inheritance, and a workshop that refused to die. It went viral not in a flashy way, but in a slow, powerful ripple. Clients came in with flowers. A retired judge emailed to say he wanted to donate reclaimed oak. Someone sent us 2 crates of handcrafted tools with a note, "For your next beginning." And Lacey, she didn't cry. But I saw her linger in the hallway that day, standing beneath the quote we burned into the studio's entrance beam. Real legacies are built in the quiet hours by hands that choose to stay. She didn't say a word, but she stood there for a long, long time. On what would have been Dad's 68th birthday, we closed the shop. Just me and her, no contractors, no clients. We dusted off one of Dad's old sketchbooks and chose a simple design, a bench. We spent the whole day building it. No music, just tools and memory. The grain of the wood matched the old porch swing he used to fix every spring. The screws were the same kind he kept in a jar labeled "Maybe Someday." We didn't talk much. But when we were done sanding the final edge smooth, I looked at her and said softly he would have liked this. She nodded, not smiling, not crying, just present. And in that moment, for the first time since all of this began, I wasn't holding anger. I was holding peace. By fall, the workshop felt like it had always been there, like it had grown straight from the soil, not from ashes. The walls were covered in soft stains from fingerprints and wood dust. The air smelled like cedar, sweat, and hope. Clients came in and out, some bringing cookies, others just stopping to say thank you. We carved a rhythm. And Lacey, unbelievably, was part of it. She never missed a shift, never arrived late. She started taking initiative, catching supplier overcharges, organizing our first spreadsheet that actually made sense, even suggesting new grant options I hadn't known existed. She didn't ask for praise. She didn't smile much either, but when she did, when something genuinely made her laugh, it was different, smaller, realer. Still, I kept a quiet distance, not cold, just cautious. Because trust, once broken, doesn't rebuild itself. It's handcrafted, glued, sanded, and you feel every seam even when it's whole again. Then one Tuesday morning, Lacey brought in an old thermos. It was metal, scratched and dented with faded blue paint. I recognized it immediately. "Dad's," I said, blinking. She nodded, found it in one of the storage bins, thought maybe it should be here. She placed it on the windowsill, next to the potted plant no one could keep alive. Neither of us said anything else. But for the rest of the day, I caught myself glancing at it. It was like a relic, proof of the man who built us, who built this dream before we even believed we could. By winter, we had hired 3 part-time assistants and expanded into the back room. A mural started forming, just pencil outlines for now, scenes of carpenters, blueprints, and little girls holding toolboxes. It wasn't a company anymore, it was a heartbeat. That's when I got a letter. Not from a lawyer. From a client. An older woman named Ms. Evelyn, who'd hired us to rebuild her late husband's study into a reading room. She wrote, "This place feels different, not polished, not corporate, just true. I think your father would be proud." I read it twice, then again. And I realized I wasn't building to prove anything anymore. I was just building. Lacey came to my office one evening, after everyone had gone home. She knocked once, then entered. "I need to tell you something," she said. "It's been on my chest since we started all this." I looked up, said nothing. She took a deep breath. "I didn't just forge Dad's signature," she whispered. "I stole letters, ones he wrote to you, birthday cards, old emails. I deleted some of them. I was so angry, so stupid. I thought if I erased your connection to him, maybe I'd feel like he loved me more." The room went still. My heart didn't race. I just listened. She continued, her voice cracking. "I don't expect you to forgive that. I just wanted you to know the whole truth, even if it wrecks whatever we've managed to fix." I closed my laptop, stood up, walked to the door and shut it. Then I turned to face her. "You didn't break me, Lacey, you broke yourself, but here's what I know: people can rebuild, if they want to, if they stay, and you did." Her lip trembled, but she held it in. "I don't hate you," I said, "but I will never see you the way I used to, and maybe that's okay." She nodded. And for the first time since this all began, she whispered back, "Yeah, maybe that's fair." That weekend, we finally sealed the mural. It stretched across the back wall like a quiet anthem. And in the bottom right corner, barely noticeable, were 3 initials carved into the wood. D.W. Dad. No flourish, no plaque, just truth, hidden in the grain where it belonged. Now when I walk through the shop, I don't think of Lacey as my betrayer. I think of her as my reminder. That broken doesn't mean finished. That trust isn't restored in words, but in work. And that sometimes the most lasting legacies aren't the ones we inherit. They're the ones we build with the same hands that once tore everything apart. We never held a grand reopening, no ribbon cutting, no announcement. Because the people who mattered already knew. They came anyway. Ms. Evelyn stopped by every Friday afternoon with a new bookmark for our community reading shelf. The kids from the shelter painted handmade tiles that we installed in the front walkway. Even our old history teacher came in with a cracked piano bench and left with a restored one, smiling like we'd returned a piece of his youth. One day, a woman brought her teenage daughter in. The girl barely made eye contact. She wore oversized sleeves and kept her earbuds in, but her mom said she'd been researching trades that she wanted to feel useful with her hands. Lacey took her on a tour. Not me. She showed her the benches, the woodpile, the sanders, the pegboard of tools with names scrawled on masking tape, and by the end, the girl took one earbud out. That moment stayed with me. Because Lacey didn't sell her a dream. She simply showed her the work. Around that time, Lacey sat me down one evening, her hands folded tightly in her lap. I've been saving, she said, for months, every extra dollar, every contract bonus. It's not everything, but I want to give this back. She slid an envelope across the desk. Inside was a cashier's check, $25,000. I know what I took can't be undone, she said, but this I earned. I stared at it. Not because of the amount, but because I hadn't asked. And she had still given. That was the difference now. The choice. We put the money into a new program. The Whitmore Project. Free weekend classes for girls aged 14-18 in design, trade skills, and ethical entrepreneurship. We let them break things, build things, dream up murals and lighting fixtures and even floating bunk beds, which, against all odds, we actually made work. And the first person to teach the finance session each Saturday. Lacey. No one ever guessed she once forged a signature to steal hundreds of thousands of dollars. Because what they saw now was someone steady, honest, human. Years passed. The studio grew. We bought the adjoining space, added another wing, expanded our staff. Some days were hard, tools broke, deadlines piled up, clients flaked, but every time the dust settled, what remained was simple purpose. We stopped being sisters in the way we used to be. No more birthday brunches or movie nights, no pretending. But we became partners. In truth. In work. In something neither of us fully deserved, but both of us protected with our whole hearts. On the 3rd anniversary of Dad's death, I visited his grave alone. I brought coffee, his kind, black, no sugar. And I sat beside the headstone, fingers curled around the thermos Lacey had brought to the studio all those months ago. I told him about the workshop, the kids, the new garden boxes we were building behind the shelter. And I told him about her. Not to defend her. Not to complain. Just to explain. She stayed, Dad, I said softly. She worked, she didn't run, and maybe that doesn't make her innocent, but it makes her something else. I left the thermos on the stone. Let the wind carry the silence. And I walked away with dry eyes. Because grief didn't define me anymore. Neither did betrayal. What defined me was the choice I made, not to forgive quickly, but to rebuild fully. Not to erase the past, but to build beyond it. Some stories end with an apology. Ours didn't. Because what Lacey gave me wasn't a perfect ending, it was real effort, over time, without applause, without ever asking to be called a hero. And honestly, that was more powerful than any "I'm sorry" she could have said. Today, when I walk through Whitmore Workshop, I don't just see walls and beams and desks. I see the fight. The quiet battle for something worth saving, even after it was nearly destroyed. I see the way sunlight hits the bench we built on Dad's birthday. I see the girls laughing in the back room, comparing sketchbooks and stretching their hands into calluses. I see Lacey, head bent over spreadsheets, still showing up, still staying. And I see me. Not the broken version of me from that day in the car after the will reading. Not the silent daughter crushed by betrayal. I see the woman who chose to stay rooted. To rise through the dirt even when it was poisoned. To speak not with fire but with follow-through. We still don't talk about the trust. Or the will. Or the day the court finally closed the case and ordered the restitution. There's no plaque on the wall that says justice was served. But I don't need one. Because justice doesn't always look like headlines. Sometimes it looks like balance. Like calm. Like two people showing up for something that matters more than pride. One of the newer interns, a girl named Tessa, asked me recently if Lacey and I were close. I paused before answering. Then said, no, not in the way you mean, but we're bonded by what we lost and what we chose to build afterward. She nodded as if that made sense. Maybe it did. Maybe that's what redemption really is. Not a clean slate, but a rough one that you keep writing on anyway, smudges and all. We kept the thermos. It still sits on the windowsill. Next to it, a small sign Lacey hand-lettered months after her restitution was paid in full. Some debts aren't repaid with money, they're repaid by staying. And underneath that, a photo of Dad in overalls, grinning, holding a hammer like a king. That's the version of him we chose to remember. Not the version tangled in court papers and signatures and notarized betrayal. But the man who built a foundation strong enough for us to fail and still have something left to stand on. We didn't inherit a legacy. We built one. And every nail, every beam, every lesson is part of the story I tell now. Not because it's easy, but because it's true. And truth, like wood, gets stronger with time. Even when it's scarred. Even when it's been stolen. Especially when it's reclaimed.